Imagine a fly lands on a newborn calf. Not a giant monster, not some exotic creature from a horror movie, just a fly. But a few days later, that calf has a wound that is not healing. It smells wrong. It is getting bigger. And inside the wound, something is moving. That is how one of the most disturbing animal parasites on Earth announced its return to the United States. On June 3, 2026, USDA confirmed New World Screwworm in a 3-week-old calf in Zavala County, Texas. The larvae were found in the calf's umbilical area, which is exactly the kind of fresh wound this parasite is built to exploit. And the strangest part is not that this parasite exists. The strangest part is that the United States already beat it. Decades ago, New World Screwworm was pushed out of the country using one of the weirdest public health weapons ever invented. Billions of sterile flies released into the wild to sabotage the insect's own reproduction. It worked so well that for most Americans, screwworm became a forgotten enemy. But now, in the current outbreak context, it is back in the conversation. USDA is confirming animal detections. CDC is tracking the public health risk. Texas officials are restricting animal movement in affected zones. And the government's counterattack once again involves fighting flies with flies. So what is New World Screwworm? Why does it matter for livestock, pets, wildlife, and rarely humans? And how did a parasite America defeated once make it back to the border of a modern biosecurity system? The answer starts with a name that sounds almost too dramatic to be real. Cochleomya hominivirax. The last word means something close to man-eater. And for once, the scientific name is not exaggerating. Here is what makes New World Screwworm different from the kind of maggots people usually imagine. Many fly larvae feed on dead tissue, garbage, or decay. New World Screwworm larvae feed on living flesh. A female fly is attracted to the smell of an open wound, or to moist body openings like the nose, ears, mouth, eyes, genitals, or the navel area of a newborn animal. She lays eggs at the edge of that vulnerable spot. Those eggs hatch into larvae, and the larvae do not wait around. They burrow downward.
That is where the screw part of screwworm comes from. The maggots dig into the wound as they feed, almost like a screw being driven into wood. As they feed, the wound can grow wider, deeper, more painful, and more infected. The animal may become irritated, shake its head, isolate itself, stop eating, or show signs of distress. The wound may drain, it may smell like decay, and if it is not treated quickly, the damage can be severe or even fatal. This is why ranchers take it so seriously. It is not just a gross parasite. It is a biological emergency for any warm-blooded animal in the path of the fly. Cattle can be infested. Horses can be infested. Sheep, goats, deer, dogs, cats, wildlife, and even birds can be affected. Humans can be affected too, although in the United States, the risk to people remains low, and CDC has reported no locally acquired human infestations from the current U.S. animal situation. That distinction matters. This is not a reason for everyone in America to panic. It is a reason for animal owners, veterinarians, wildlife workers, public health officials, and people in affected areas to pay attention early.
Because with screwworm, early is everything. To understand why one confirmed calf in Texas triggered a national response, you have to understand the history. New World Screwworm used to be a nightmare for livestock producers in the United States. It cost money, it killed animals, and it created a constant fear around every birth, every scratch, every wound. Then scientists discovered a weakness in the fly's life cycle. Female New World Screwworm flies usually mate only once. That one detail changed everything. If you can flood an area with sterile male flies, the wild females still mate, but the eggs do not hatch. No viable eggs means no new larvae. No new larvae means the population collapses after enough generations. This is called the sterile insect technique, and it sounds like science fiction, because honestly, it kind of is. You mass produce the pest, you sterilize the males, you release them by the millions, and instead of poisoning the entire environment, you turn the insect's own mating behavior into the trap. The United States used that strategy to eradicate New World screwworm from the country in the 1960s. Later, officials and partners kept pushing the pest farther south, maintaining a biological barrier through sterile fly programs. When a smaller outbreak appeared in the Florida Keys in 2016 and 2017, the same basic strategy helped eliminate it. That history is why officials are not treating this as a mystery they have never seen before. They have a playbook. But the problem is that the fly also has momentum. Since 2023, New World screwworm has been moving northward through Central America and Mexico. CDC says the outbreak began with detections in Panama and Costa Rica, then spread through countries where the pest had previously been controlled. By June 2026, CDC reported more than 185,000 cumulative animal cases in Mexico and Central America, and more than 2,100 cases in people across that broader regional outbreak. Now, most of those human cases are not in the United States, and CDC's message for the US public has been clear. The risk to people remains low, and risk is localized to places where the flies are actually circulating. But from an animal health perspective, the northward movement is exactly what officials feared, because screwworm does not need a huge opening to begin. A tick bite can be enough, a small scratch can be enough, a castration wound can be enough, the umbilical area of a newborn calf can be enough, and livestock systems are full of moments like that. Animals are born, animals fight, animals rub against fences, wildlife gets injured, stray dogs develop untreated wounds. A single wound can become an invitation. That is the uncomfortable part of this story. The parasite does not need chaos to start. It just needs access. The first confirmed U.S. animal case in the current outbreak was a 3-week-old calf in Zavala County, Texas. USDA said animal health officials began immediate containment actions. That included forming an incident command team with Texas officials, creating a 20-kilometer infested zone around the detection, using quarantines and movement controls, expanding surveillance, increasing fly trapping, implementing wildlife strategies, and releasing sterile flies. That response may sound intense for one calf, but in biosecurity, one confirmed case is not just one case. It is a signal.
It means the parasite crossed into a place where it had been absent. It means there may be other animals to check, other wounds to inspect, other flies to trap, and other movements to trace. And then the situation kept evolving. Texas animal health officials listed additional detections in calves and goats. USDA later described the first detected dog case in Zavala County, New Mexico, after an initial report connected to a Texas veterinarian was reclassified based on where the dog lived. That dog case was believed to be isolated, but officials still investigated the dog's movement and exposure history. This is why the numbers in this story can change quickly. A detection is not just a headline. It launches a field investigation. Where was the animal? Did it move? Were other animals nearby? Are there wounds? Are there flies? Are there egg masses? Are there larvae? Is this a dead-end event or evidence of local circulation? That is the race officials are running. Not against a rumor, against a life cycle. The fly's life cycle is the engine of the outbreak.
CDC says one female can lay 200 to 300 eggs at a time, and up to 3,000 eggs in her lifetime. After hatching, the larvae feed for about a week before dropping to the ground, burrowing into the soil, and eventually emerging as adult flies. So when officials say, report suspicious wounds immediately, they are not being dramatic. They are trying to interrupt the cycle before larvae become flies, before flies become more eggs, and before a local problem becomes a regional one. For ranchers, this means daily inspections can become the difference between one treated animal and a much larger outbreak. For veterinarians, it means collecting samples correctly and reporting suspected cases fast. For wildlife workers, it means monitoring animals that cannot simply be lined up and inspected like cattle. For pet owners in affected areas, it means checking wounds on dogs and cats, especially animals that roam outdoors or recently traveled through places with confirmed cases with known cases. And for the general public, it means understanding the risk without turning it into internet panic. Because this parasite is horrifying enough on its own, it does not need exaggeration. Let's talk about humans carefully. New World screwworm can infest people. It can lay eggs in wounds or body openings, and the larva can cause painful, foul-smelling wounds. In untreated cases, the damage can become severe. But CDC says there have been no locally acquired human infestations reported in the United States from the current U.S. animal detections. CDC also notes that the overall risk to people remains low and localized to areas where the flies are circulating. There was a travel-associated human case confirmed in 2025 in a person who returned to the United States after travel to El Salvador. That is important because it shows how the parasite can appear in the U.S. through travel. But that case did not mean the fly had established itself locally in humans. The practical advice is simple. If you are in an affected area, keep wounds clean and covered, use insect repellent, limit exposed skin when necessary, and seek medical care immediately if you see or feel larvae in a wound. Do not try to handle it casually. Do not throw live larvae outside. Do not treat it like a normal bug bite. But also do not hear man-eater and assume this is about humans being hunted by swarms of killer flies. The main battlefield is animals. And the main reason the story matters nationally is agriculture. USDA has described New World screwworm as a serious pest that affects livestock, pets, wildlife, and less commonly, people and birds. The threat is animal suffering first, but the economic consequences can be huge. If livestock cannot move freely, ranchers lose flexibility. If quarantines expand, animal movement becomes slower and more expensive. If trading partners worry about spread, trade can be disrupted. If wildlife becomes involved, the problem becomes harder to track. And if the pest establishes itself, the cost of eliminating it rises. That is why USDA's current response is not just medical, it is logistical. There are quarantines, movement controls, fly traps, surveillance teams, wildlife monitoring, outreach campaigns, border measures, emergency use treatment authorizations, and sterile fly releases. USDA's current status page says all southern ports of entry are closed to livestock trade at this time. It also says USDA continues dispersing 100 million sterile insects per week in Mexico and along the US-Mexico border, adjusting the release area based on science and modeling. That is an enormous number, but it makes sense when you remember the strategy. You are not trying to kill one fly. You are trying to overwhelm a population's ability to reproduce. It is basically a numbers war against biology. The sterile fly strategy is one of the most elegant pest control ideas ever used. Instead of asking, how do we kill every fly? It asks, how do we make the next generation impossible? Release enough sterile males, and every successful sterile mating becomes a dead end. The female lays eggs, but they are not viable. The population does not replenish. After enough cycles, the outbreak collapses. It is targeted, it is species-specific, and officials say the release of sterile flies poses no risk to wildlife, livestock, or people in infested areas. But there is a catch. The strategy has to keep pace with the outbreak. If the pest spreads faster than surveillance can detect it, officials are always reacting behind the fly. If animal movement spreads cases into new zones, sterile fly releases have to be adjusted. If wildlife carries infestations outside controlled areas, the problem becomes less predictable. If people do not report suspicious wounds quickly, officials lose time. And time is exactly what screwworm uses. A small wound becomes eggs. Eggs become larvae. Larvae become more flies. More flies become more wounds. That loop is the enemy. This is also why the first question is not, will this become a disaster? The better question is, can officials keep every detection small? That is how eradication works. Not by pretending the parasite is harmless, and not by acting like the whole country is already infested. It works by finding cases fast, locking down movement when needed, treating animals, destroying larvae, trapping flies, releasing sterile males, and keeping the public informed without causing chaos. The food supply question is a good example. When people hear flesh-eating maggots in livestock, they naturally wonder about meat. USDA has stated that the U.S. food supply remains safe. New World screwworm does not infest meat, fruits, vegetables, or other food products. Affected animals would be identified through inspection, and contaminated product would not enter commerce. So the issue is not that grocery store meat is suddenly full of parasites. The issue is that living animals can suffer, herds can be disrupted, and containment can become expensive if the parasite gains a foothold. That is a very different story, and it is important to tell it accurately. So what should we watch next?
First, watch the confirmed detection map and official updates from USDA, APHIS, and state animal health agencies. In an outbreak like this, the exact number of detections can change quickly. Second, watch whether new cases are connected to known infested zones or appear far away from them. A case inside an expected response area is serious. A case far outside it can change the strategy. Third, watch wildlife. Livestock can be inspected, quarantined, and treated. Wildlife is harder. Deer, feral hogs, injured mammals, and stray animals can turn a contained problem into a wider surveillance challenge. Fourth, watch sterile fly capacity. The history of screwworm eradication depends on producing and releasing enough sterile insects in the right places at the right time. And fifth, watch public behavior. The most advanced response plan in the world still depends on people noticing wounds, calling veterinarians, reporting suspect cases, and not moving animals out of restricted zones without authorization. This is not just a science story. It is a coordination story. A rancher notices something wrong. A veterinarian collects a sample. A lab confirms the species. A state agency maps the zone. USDA adjusts sterile fly releases. CDC monitors human risk. Wildlife agencies prepare for harder-to-see cases. Pet owners check animals. Border officials control movement. And all of it is happening because a tiny larva can turn a wound into a warning sign. The most unsettling thing about New World screwworm is how ordinary its entry point can be. A scratch, a bite, a newborn's umbilical area, a small wound that does not look dramatic at first. But the most hopeful thing is that this parasite is not unknown. Scientists understand its life cycle. Veterinarians know what to look for. USDA has beaten it before. The sterile insect technique has worked before. And every early report gives officials a better chance to stop the chain. So the story is not a horror parasite has conquered America. The story is more tense than that. A parasite America once erased has reappeared in the current outbreak context. Officials are racing to keep it from becoming established. The battle is happening in wounds, in traps, in labs, in quarantine zones, and in the sky, where sterile flies are being released by the millions. And the ending depends on whether the response can move faster than the fly. Because with New World screwworm, the scary part is not the bite. It is what happens after the eggs hatch.